I don't know if you recall this particular video, and 2 years ago it was posted, and it was you basically saying, yeah, Israel will cease to exist, right? Like this cannot continue to go on. And that was 2 years ago, the video. But in reality, you've seen this coming for how long now have you been seeing what was going to happen is what's happening in Israel right now?
There were shades of it and indications of it as early as the first term of George H.W. Bush around 1989. But he was a very experienced president, and he put his foot down, and probably the last U.S. president to do so. There hasn't been one since. And told then Tel Aviv, essentially, get out of my bailiwick. I don't want to have anything to do with you right now. I'm going to fight a war against Iraq. I'm going to take Saddam Hussein's army out of Kuwait, and I'm going to end, just like the UN mandate told me to do. And I don't want you interfering. And then when Saddam Hussein shot some Scuds at Iraq, he reinforced that. That really made Israel angry. That's why he lost the 1992 election. They poured their money through AIPAC into Bill Clinton's campaign and defeated him. Ever since then, it's almost been what George W. Bush in the Oval Office in 2004 said formally to Ariel Sharon. He said, nothing's worked for the past 45, 50 years. Roadmap, two-state solution, peace plan, all of that has failed. So it's over to you. Sharon looked at him with a expression of bewilderment and said, what's that mean, Mr. President? He said, I mean, it's you. I'm not going to bother you. I'll back you to the hilt. I'm not going to bother you. Ever since then, and with Netanyahu coming in, of course, leaving finance minister and coming in to be prime minister, you got Satan himself coming in to Jerusalem now. And ever since then, the United States has just stood back and done whatever Israel's bid it to do.
Yeah. And at this point, it's so obvious to me how the lobby is working. I mean, it's so clear, like we see the man behind the curtain, and yet we just now, like you heard us talking about, they just signed a resolution in Congress saying that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism.
This is their weapon of choice. The ADL kind of led the fight on it. They are one of the most bigoted Nazi-like organizations I've ever encountered. It got to the point where Powell wouldn't even let the head of ADL come into his office at the State Department. He was so angry with him. Colin Powell's views are much the same as my own. He just was a little more circumspect about expressing them. And it was from a point of view of military necessity with regard to Powell. After all, he was a four-star general before he was Secretary of State. And he knew that Israel had transitioned from its status during the Cold War as being an unsinkable aircraft carrier at the eastern end of the Mediterranean, fundamentally a strategic asset on the southern flank of NATO, to being a total strategic liability. They are no asset at all now. In fact, they are a bad, grievous liability because they suck us in to the things that they do, not only to the damage of our international reputation, which has already taken huge licks from torture in Iraq and Afghanistan and Syria and Libya, and you could just go on and on. They're just rendering body blows to it right now. I would say, I talked with a friend of mine the other day who was telling me that, hey, you know, the choir is really only us. I said, no joke. The global South in particular, but most of the rest of the world, some 4+ billion people, think we're insane. And when you have that sort of thing happen, people mobilize against you. They build pacts, they build allies, they put together consortiums, they do all manner of things, but they will bring you down. And that's what we're creating in the world right now. We're creating a host of enemies.
Yeah, I've been watching that for a while. So let me add, I was thinking about this recently, and I often say this phrase, you know, pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered. And it's something that I say and pertains to a lot of stuff. And I was just recently thinking about this in reference to Israel because they had it made. They had it made in 48. They could have just had the Jewish state. They could have just had and left well enough alone. And they just couldn't do that. They just couldn't do that. So do you, I mean, am I reading this wrong?
No, you've you've read a part of it right that has now become the major, if not the sole part of it. Most of the Jews coming out of Europe and forming the original state, not all of them, we've got some kernel of the kind of terrorists we have in charge today. And I use that term very circumspectly because they were the worst terrorists in the world at the time. They killed the British and blew up hotels and all kinds of things. But the majority of the people were communists, leaving, or ex-communists, leaving Hitler's pogroms, Hitler's Holocaust, whatever, leaving and looking for safety. And they formed kibbutzes and they were happy. They were a socialized state. Netanyahu has said, publicly said in English, I know what we were in the beginning, but we're not that anymore. We're a capitalist state. We're an economic powerhouse, and we're going to keep on that track. Well, he's right. They're a predatory capitalist state. Having learned from the United States, they have surpassed us. They're a vicious state that will sell arms to anybody. Our enemies, they sell arms to all the time. They will do anything. Mark Rich proved Netanyahu's character when Mark Rich broke sanctions, UN sanctions on Iraq, bought oil from Saddam Hussein, and shipped it to Israel at discounted prices. And he was put in jail for it. He was put in jail for it, and guess who pardoned him in an ignominious act at the very end of his presidency? William Jefferson Clinton, because he knew Mark Rich had a hand in getting him elected in his first term.
Colonel, I look around at what's going on right now, and I almost feel like, in a way, they always say the night is darkest just before the dawn. It does seem to me that while things are getting progressively worse, I think that we've reached a point of no return when it comes to major corporate political powerhouses like ADL and AIPAC. I don't think there's any coming back from this. I think that the overwhelming majority of the electorate now looks at them as the real problem and the plight of why we aren't able to have nice things in this country. They in particular are obviously a huge part of why we have such a messed up foreign policy. Do you agree that as bad as things are right now, there is going to be a period of enlightenment that is going to follow where their power is not going to be what it once was, especially because of the lengths that they are now going to try to silence people from disagreeing with what they're doing?
I always try to find at least some optimism in events in the world. And I would like to subscribe to what you just said. But I guess I've just been here too long and witnessed this too many times and seen how things get swept under the rug, and they particularly get swept under the rug for Israel. And let's just look at what's happening right now. Netanyahu, I think, stumbled into this. I have not seen enough evidence yet to convince me he designed it. He stumbled into it, much the way we stumbled into 9/11, the neoconservatives in particular. It was their Pearl Harbor. Well, this is his Pearl Harbor. His intent was to eradicate the Palestinians or push them out of the West Bank, Golan Heights, East Jerusalem, and Gaza, slowly but surely. Now he's been given the opportunity to eradicate them, and that's what he's doing. He's either going to kill them, and he is doing that mightily well right now. Men, women, children, UN workers, anybody else that gets in the way of his bombs. Oh, as Gideon Levy is always pointing out, our bombs. He's doing it, and he'll push the ones he can't kill in southern Gaza into the desert, and to hell with that. And he'll push the others into Jordan out of the West Bank. He's already been conducting pogroms almost daily in the West Bank with Ben-Gvir and his stooges. They're now arming them with first-class military weapons. They were using pitchforks, shotguns, bows and arrows, whatever they could come across. This is the settlers under Ben-Gvir. Now Israel's arming them with Uzis and other type weapons. So he is going to eradicate the Palestinians, period.
Yeah. I mean, they're not even keeping it a secret, which is why it's so strange to me that in this country, there's people arguing about this, like whether or not it is or is not a genocide, whether or not they are or are not entitled to this level of self-defense. Like, these people are actually arguing this. And so as somebody who has served in our armed forces, what do you say to the people that legitimately think that this is a form of fair self-defense to get their hostages back?
Well, it's preposterous. It's as preposterous as our making torture official national policy in 2002. We've never done that in our history. We tortured people in the Philippines and Vietnam and elsewhere. But we never had a president of the United States make official United States policy torture of other human beings against the very convention at the United Nations that we helped to get passed, and against the 1948 Geneva Conventions, as well as every other aspect of humanitarian law. So that's where we are now. We're at a point where if we don't take some kind of significant action to stop this, then we're just as guilty as Netanyahu.
Thanks for watching. If you want to support our mission to transform politics into service, please like this video, subscribe, follow us on social media, and consider joining our Patreon, where you'll get early access to our interviews as well as other exclusive content. Links are in the description. Peace out.